Okay. Number one topic, because Leah mentioned it earlier today, the Writers Guild strike.
Yeah.
It is impacting a lot of people we know. It's impacting us a little bit.
Mhm.
I thought we could discuss it and at least give a recap for, people who listen to pitch, who are in the screenwriting world. If they're not following closely, I think a lot of them are not uh, Writers Guild members. They're sort of pre-WGA, right? Let's give a recap of like what the highlights are, what the most important factors, why are people striking? What are they? What are the primary differences between the two positions? We don't have to go into too much detail, as much as you may want to recap, and then we'll just talk about how it's impacting um, the podcast.
Yeah. So we are in the year 2023. If somebody's watching this a little bit later, and writer's strike happened midnight Tuesday. I believe it was it Tuesday or was it Monday?
I think it was Monday.
Monday. And we're mainly striking because of streamers. So the way that streamers work and the way that we negotiated our last strike rules in 2007 is a little bit different because streaming wasn't as popular as it is now. And we're having a couple of issues with that, such as mini rooms. And a mini room, for people who don't know what a mini room is, it's when you have a handful of writers or a very, very skeleton crew of writers working on a TV show before production. And it used to be you had pre-production for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then during production, you had your writing room. And then in post-production, you also had a writer. But right now what's happening in some studio spaces is maybe you have a mini room and then you have one writer. There's not enough being done for compensation for writers. And we're also dealing with residuals. So streaming residuals don't work the same as TV residuals. So that's something else that we're fighting for. Another idea was paying per writer. So if a writing team goes in, that writing team is paid as one writer, even though there's two of them. And so you're fighting for the team that is due for them. So establishing minimums for streams, room, and there are bullet points to all of these on what our proposal is, and then there's bullet points to what the AMPTP is offering instead. And another big issue has been AI. Does anybody want to talk about that a little bit? Do you want me to keep going?
I don't know the full breadth of what the AI battle is but I want to caveat that with saying there is an attempt, I believe, by the studios to gauge how much AI can write and replace writers. And the writers are obviously fighting to prevent that for a couple of reasons. So that was a negotiating bullet point that I believe the writers wanted certain concessions and guarantees around AI not getting credit, not working on the, not replacing writers basically. And the AMPTP, I believe, didn't offer a counter negotiation to that, from what I recall, and I could be wrong.
No, they didn't. They said, so the proposal that we made, it's to regulate the use of artificial intelligence. So AI can't write or rewrite literary material, or it can't be, whatever they come up with can't be used as source material. And the AMPTP came up with a rejection to that, and they countered by offering annual meetings to discuss advancement in technology. So that was it. And I want to go back real quick to paying writers separately. It wasn't paying writers separately. I'm so sorry. It's making sure that each writer gets pension and health, because I recently heard a story where two writers went in and the studio was like, well, only one of you gets pension and health. And they're like, but there's two of us. And that was rejected, completely rejected. I'm sorry to step on your train of thought there, Angel.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I think any illumination on why writers would be forced to strike is helpful
Mhm.
for people who maybe don't understand
Right.
what's at
And
stake here. And what's at stake is people's livelihoods and jobs at the expense of CEOs, gigantic payouts, and record profits.
yeah. And one of the other things that streaming has done is it's shortened the TV writing employment duration for how long we're allowed to write on shows, because it's 10 episodes, 9 episodes, sometimes it's 12, but it used to be 24. And so you're having writers work on a show for the course of a year, and I'm so sorry, not for the course of the year, but the way that seasons work, you're working on one show. It's very difficult to then work on another show because of the way that it fractions out. And so one of the things that we're working on is how long can we stay employed? What does pre-production look like for writers? What does production look like for writers? And what does post-production look like for writers? And guaranteeing minimums for all of that.
What does post-production look like for writers today? And keep in mind, like, I know less about this than either one of you. So I think for people who aren't up to speed on the current environment for writers, like, what does that look like today? So right now, let's say, let's pick a show that a lot of people have seen. Go back to, I don't know, what's a popular show. I don't want to say, I almost said Game of Thrones because that's like a default talk about streaming
Yeah.
show, but that's not, that's HBO. But let's say Ted Lasso. I'm a writer hired to work on season 3 of Ted Lasso. What does that look like for me? And maybe that's a bad example. Maybe we need to go back to like network days and X-Files and what it was like before streaming. So you go into pre-production, writers are hired. There's a writer's room that's coming up with ideas, that's outlining, that's figuring out the arc of a season.
Yep.
And different writers are assigned different episodes, right? Is that sort of,
Yeah, generally, yeah, safe to assume.
okay? And then then also while filming the whole season, there's writers participating throughout. The writer's room is coming up with revisions and new ideas, and sometimes making changes on set. Sometimes
there's generally the writer of the episode goes to set to collaborate, to kind of supervise for the story purposes, to handle any scripted problems or story problems that may arise, and to write on set.
And so as things have evolved, how has that been changing? I know there's a lot of talk about mini rooms and people being assigned shorter periods of work that they're paid for, even if the amount of work is still the same. And I know the framing that I've heard regularly is turning writing into a gig job, as opposed to a writer being employed on a show.
Yeah. So I listened to a recent episode of Script Notes, and I don't remember who it was talking about being a new TV writer. And she said, as a new TV writer, it's in the contract that I don't get paid the same amount as a seasoned writer, even though I'm doing the same amount of work. And I know a lot of that's like contractual stuff, but she wrote 2 episodes of something and wasn't making enough to live off of in that way because of the way that streaming works now. But I'm not too familiar with the TV world because my background is more in feature. I would like to be.
Well, Liz talked about this. When we talked to Liz Hannah, she talked about, they had a room for the girl on Plainville, or the girl from Plainville. And then that room ended and all those writers went away. So she was left with her co-showrunner to then be on set to make changes versus the whole writer. So I also have a buddy who's on a network show, and he will go to the set for his episodes to be supervised, in addition to the showrunners staying where they are and working, right? So Liz was saying all my writers went away and I had all the episodes. And then it was on me to then rewrite and to supervise with my co-showrunner. Whereas my other friend on a network show, his showrunner exists and his position exists during the production run, so he can go and watch his episodes. And I believe he gets paid for working the time he works for those episodes, in addition to writing the episode, which happened months before or weeks before. So if, and again, I haven't done this, so I'm just, kind of taking the stuff I've heard. So if many rooms are ending and they're saying, well, just the showrunner has to like stick around and the individual writers don't have that on set demand when their episodes are going, then that's a place where writers are not able to make money. And then post-production, you have the entire post flow, which showrunners can come in and supervise and check in. They have post supervisors. And then I would think that at one point in time, the writer of each episode would also be in, giving notes, giving feedback to make sure that their episodes were going through post-production with what they intended on the page, because the showrunner's off doing other things theoretically. So I don't know how it's changed in super granular specific ways, but the writers who are striking right now, including us, are striking for a very specific reason. And it's not because things have changed across the board in a more fair and equitable way. It's
Go ahead.
And the WGA posted their negotiations as of May 1st. So they have what their proposal is, and then they had what the AMPTP offered, and that's online. And most of it is minimums, and they have different bullet points for each. Do you want me to go through those bullet points?
We can, if you want. I was just going to throw out there the conversation that Angel mentioned about writers being on set and doing rewrites, and with the girl from Plainville, is that the name of that show? I've been listening to this Office Ladies podcast that's all about The Office, and what they talk about regularly is the writers on set and the writers rewriting and pitching new ideas as they're filming every episode. I mean, it was constant. It happened throughout the show. I've heard the same about Friends. I've heard the same about other sitcoms, where it's just constant feedback, constant interaction between writers and actors and directors to make the content better. So not only are we, not only are writers fighting for their salaries and their jobs and their benefits, right? They're fighting for quality. And how do you make content that people enjoy, that is more human, that is more funny, that is more dramatic, that is more real? How do you do all that if you just eliminate the people who are good at that? I think that's a big point, that a lot of people, when they hear strike, they think dollar figures, they think things like that. And what gets lost is quality. And that gets right into the AI conversation, where there will be producers out there who say, I can get the gist of this story and a bunch of rough drafts from AI and just hire one showrunner to clean it all up. But you're going to get predictable stuff. You're going to get bland things. You're going to get a lot of uncollaborative. I don't even know if that's a word, but like there's not a lot of creative collaboration going on in that situation. And so like, this fight is about much more than just jobs and benefits. That's important and it's critical, but it's also about the quality of art and entertainment going forward, right? Like
one of the conversations that Carrie, who did the Lipana interview, when we were walking to the picket line, we were talking about diversity in the writer's room, and somebody was talking about The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and how just snappy and witty, and it's, yes, the tone of the show and the tone of Amy, but Amy's response when somebody asked her how they got to that point was, well, I have 3 writers writing dialogue. And so to your point of, it does get bland and it does get vanilla if you're just having one writer write all of these different characters for a TV series. Like, that's why diversity is so important, because not every character is going to have the same viewpoint. When you rely on just one person to continue to write like a massive interwoven storyline like a TV show, I think that's the sticking point.
And just to that, it's a massive undertaking to write a TV show.
Mm-hmm.
So Nick Pizzolatto, who wrote The True Detective, he wrote season 1 of True Detective, but he wrote that story over the course of years and years and years and years, and then adapted it to television. And this first season of True Detective is phenomenal. It's one of the best seasons of TV, in my opinion, the last 20 years. Season 2, he was rushed in his writing process. And the gentleman at HBO, who was the head of HBO or head of programming at the time, admits this in an article. He says, I rushed him. We wanted it to go because season 1 was such a big hit.
Yeah.
I rushed his process. And he's a singular guy trying to write up to what he wrote in the first season, quality-wise. So we tried to surround him with other people, but we made the decision that it was going on this schedule. And season 2 of True Detective is what it is. And what I'll say is it's not season 1.
Yeah, I actually had that conversation the other day, wondering how many industry professionals, producers at some of these production companies, how many have seen the handful of shows that have come out over the last decade or so with singular writers and thought, oh, why do we need a team of writers? Like, we've seen examples of it working, without acknowledging that is the anomaly. That is not, the status quo. And
Yeah.
it's like bands that get famous with their first record that they worked on for 5 or 6 years to get all, played all those songs live 100 times to get them perfected. And then their second album bombs out because, like, they didn't have the time and they had too much pressure to do it again. It's the same concept. And I think, looking at it from a business perspective, I think there's probably a lot of people looking at that data and making very flawed assumptions about how often you're going to get singular geniuses creating that work of art, right? It just doesn't happen that often.
On their business timeline, on their timeline for business.
Correct. Yes.
Because people can repeat their creative abilities. They recreate that all day long.
Yeah.
But like on that timeline, not a business timeline of 9 months versus 5 years. That's the distinction I think that gets lost.
That's right.
And even when you're writing a feature film and it's just one writer, like Angel and I have done, and you've done in the past, Kevin, right? I've always benefited from sending that script out for notes for my peers. A writer's room is just a sped up version of that. It's like timely. It's in the room. It's happening.
Well, and I mean, imagine. So you just wrote a novel, right? I think you're shopping around a book.
I am, yeah.
I've written novels in the past. Imagine writing your novel and then handing it off to your editor, who has all kinds of changes that they want to make, but you're no longer involved in the project.
Yeah.
Is that one person going to be able to take all the different ideas you would put into your story and make it work? That's this idea of mini rooms and writers spitting out a little bit, and then the showrunner is the only person who can make any rewrites or changes going forward. Granted, the showrunner is usually like pretty knowledgeable about what's trying to be conveyed, right? It's not quite the same perfect analogy, but
even Liz said she needs to be set up for success in that position. Liz said, when the mini room ends and all my other writers go away and it's just me and the other showrunner, I need to have the stories and the characters to a place where I can then make the changes that come up. The work can't be in bad shape and then she's scrambling, is what she was getting at. She's like, I need to be set up for success for the few changes that I need to make.
Yeah,
which requires a ton of writers and a ton of like thought power. How can we ensure that this story is as tight as possible now, so whatever changes that need to happen are minimal and manageable, for 1 or 2 people? She's got a co-showrunner on that particular show, she said.
Leah, did you want to go through those points you were going to mention?
Yes. So this is not for me. This is WGA negotiations. There's this great Twitter thread that, let me tell you, Adam Conover had posted. And so these are the proposals. WGA proposals: pre-green light room compensation, minimums in post-production, foreign streaming residuals, viewership-based streaming residuals, ad-supported free streaming services, pension and health teams, which is the thing that I mentioned, artificial intelligence, which we already talked about, and then tentative agreements, so script fees for staff writers. Staff writers receive script fees on top of their weeklies. The span is increased span cap from 400,000 to 450,000, basic cable to remain 375,000, extend span protection to writers on limited series. Cost. So WGA proposals would gain writers approximately 429 million per year. AMPTP's offers approximately 86 million per year, 48% of which is from the minimums increase. And then minimums, 6%, 5%, 5% for all minimums, including residual basis. And then feature films, so streaming features with a budget of 12 million or more receive full theatrical terms, which doesn't exist right now, including better initial compensation and residuals, because before this, writers were depending on any back-end points or any theatrical language that was in the contract to receive so much per how much it was in the theatrical release.
Right. There's no streaming equivalent to a movie doing $100 million in the box office.
Right. Guaranteed second step, which has been hotly debated. So require a second step if hired for a screenplay for less than 250% of the minimum. Then weekly pay, 50% pay upon 50% pay upon commencement, and remaining 50% to be paid out weekly over the writing period. Applies if writer is paid less than 250% of minimum. Writers above this threshold have the right to opt in to weekly pay. And then they do Appendix A, so establish minimum for streaming. Extend television terms to high budget shows made for SVOD, including weekly minimums, 13-week guarantees, and residuals based on aggregate. And then they go into episodic television, so preserving the writer's room. Pre-greenlight rooms, minimum staff of 6 writers, including 4 writer-producers. Post-greenlight rooms, one writer per episode, up to 6 episodes. Then 1 additional writer required for each 2 episodes after 6, up to a maximum of 12 writers. Example, 8 episodes require 7 writers, including 4 writer-producers. 10 episodes requires 8 writers, including 5 writer-producers. And then finally, duration of employment. So minimum staff guaranteed at least 10 consecutive weeks of work. That's for pre. And for post, writers on staff must get at least 3 weeks per episode, up to a maximum of 52 weeks. Half of the minimum staff must be employed through production. 1 writer must be employed through post. And then TV weeklies, increase weekly rates of staff writers and story editors, executive story editors by 6%, 5%, 5%. Establish new writer-producer tier with weekly rate 25% above SEESE. So it's just basic living. Like if we're going to be in a town where rent is what it is, you can't buy a house in a decent neighborhood for less than $1 million in LA, for real. And just making sure that you have guaranteed employment through the year, because it's rough trying to get staffed on a show to begin with, but then to only be staffed on the show for 10 weeks out of 52 weeks, you're not able to live off of that.
Just so I understand, let's say it's episodic TV. You're only employed 10 weeks. And then what? Then it comes back for season 2. You wait 9 months and you get 10 more weeks. Is that kind of how that works?
That can happen, yeah. You go on
but I don't know. Yeah, and I don't know how. Yeah, you go on unemployment. I don't know how many weeks for whatever show people are currently staffed on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough.
And it's especially tough. I'm sorry, go ahead, Leah.
No, go ahead.
Well, it's especially tough in the face of streamers trumpeting record profits, but we can't afford to offer these minimums. Record profits, we cannot afford, like those two things are fundamentally like the corporations and shareholders, and you have to be, beholden to them as well. But to be unwilling to compensate the actual creators of the content that all of the profits germinate from, it's a kind of a bold face, like insult.
Yeah.
We're not willing to help you survive
Mhm.
in the way like you and your kind need to survive in this town. But we can make record profits and broadcast those, and it's public knowledge because we're publicly traded companies.
Yeah.
Now the business acumen it takes to like manage a company that size and the technical demands of running a streaming service are outside the purview of writers, 100%. But what the writers are asking for is not out of proportion to what their work generates, and that's the thing that I keep coming back to. Whatever the technical like back and forth is, it's like the writers create the stuff, and then the producers, the actors, the directors, all the post-production colorists, editors, they come together, and then the corporation does with this stuff and makes money off of it for years and years and years and years. And the writers are saying, well, hey, if you're going to make money off of this for years and years and years and distribute this in all these new crazy ways, make sure we're compensated at a minimum fair percentage of what you're going to make off of this.
Yeah.
Because our work is worth that. And it's not, we don't need 100% residuals in perpetuity, which is why residuals decrease over time, but we need the minimums to survive. And if this is the economics that you're working, you look at a basketball player, like basketball player salaries are crazy. You make $32 million a year, LeBron James or whatever it is. And people say, well, that's too much. But then if you look at how much money the Lakers and the NBA makes off of LeBron James, the economics of it are proportionate to what he brings in. So he doesn't need $32 million a year to survive. But if the NBA and the Lakers make $1 billion off of him alone in one calendar year, then doesn't he have the negotiating power to say, well, hey, pay me 32?
Yeah, he's getting a percentage of what he brings in, and that's kind of what writers are asking for, right?
Yes.
The other thing to remember is like, this is, once you're in the Writers Guild, this is like the top tier of writers. Like there are a lot of people surviving beneath that who can't even like get enough work to be in that union.
Yes.
And so like we're talking about the top tier of writers and what they deserve. Not every writer ever, because like I've written some stuff and I don't deserve to get paid much for it. But like these are people who do this for a career. They have the talent, they have the track record, they're getting hired to shows that are watched by millions of people and making millions of dollars. And they're saying, we're not able to even support ourselves for 12 months because this show that brings in $1 billion is only paying us for 8 weeks of work. Right. Like,
And that's one of the things one of the guys at the picket line was talking about. He's like, if you're a novelist and you write a novel, you own that copyright. If you're a writer and you write a TV show, part of the contract is you're selling that copyright. You're selling your idea. That is what you are selling. You no longer have a legal claim to that idea the studio does. You're outright selling it. And unless you have something in your contract that says you have rights of first refusal for a sequel or a prequel or whatever, then you don't get involved in that world again. And the WGA minimums, however they're functioning, writers who are not in the WGA, like Angel and myself and you, we use that minimum to negotiate our price for things that are outside the purview of the studio system. So it matters. Like,
yeah, it affects every writer.
It trickles down in a very powerful and palpable way. And if we don't have that, then we don't have a negotiating power. If we lose the strike, which we're, where does that leave us? Well, it leaves a bunch of writers on unemployment and food stamps.
Yeah, so support the strike, support the writers. Like your favorite shows come from the minds and hearts of writers.
Yes.
The studios as there are some very intelligent people inside the studio system, like very intelligent, probably very creative. However, the shows that you see, the shows that you love, came from writers, period. They came from writers. If it wasn't their idea, someone hired a writer to bring their idea to life, and that's a show you love. So supporting these people in their effort to get fair compensation is it's like the only thing. It's the only option. No matter what the distributors look like, whether it's network TV, whether it's theater screens, whether it's stage plays of the former era or streaming services now, we can watch stuff on our phones. Whatever the temporary distribution medium is that we consume these stories, the stories have always come from creatives. They've always come from writers. Netflix will come and it will go. CBS, all these like distributors and networks, they come and they take the stuff that we create and they send it to the world. Like it's not an impossible task to send something into the world. It is valuable, but so is the stuff that's being sent into the world. So we have to support the writers, because without the writers, what are you going to watch?
And
what are you going to consume? If Netflix exists, but there's no shows, Netflix is pointless,
So there are different ways to support writers. One of the ways is you can join the picket lines. And if you go to WGAcontract2023.org, there's a strike section, and it shows you all of the picket schedules and all of the locations. So you can go there, you can join the picket lines next week. If you're a WGA member, part of the union is you're required to be there. There are different funding sources. So something unique to California and a couple of other states is if you are on strike, you are not allowed to collect unemployment. So those writers who are striking on the picket lines, they're not receiving a paycheck from anybody anymore, right? Maybe they get residuals, whatever that function is now, but they're not allowed to receive unemployment. So one of the ways that you can help them is you can go to different nonprofits and donate to them to help writers out. And I had one up, if you give me a second. So one of the things that you can donate to is Entertainment Community Fund. It was formerly the Actors Fund. I don't know if that's specific for actors, but one of the writers posted on Twitter. And there are other places that you can also donate to writers who are needing it right now.
And when we'll put some of those in the description on YouTube. So,
yeah.
Okay. Before we end this topic,
Yeah.
let's talk about the Pitch podcast. We've had some discussions about, changes to make going forward. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so we decided, first of all, if nobody's listening to Pitch Podcast, listen to it. It's a great podcast Angel and I have done. Hopefully you'll learn something like we've been learning things, but there's two parts to the podcast. Part of the podcast is writers pitching their material, and that's the premium portion. And then the free portion is either us talking about the industry or screenwriting, or us interviewing screenwriters or writers or executives or heads of nonprofit. And because of the strike rules, and because the point of us having the writers come on and pitch their ideas is in hopes of it getting made, we've decided to stop doing the premium portion until the strike is over. Because who are they going to be pitching to? We don't want to be scabs, and we don't want to support scabs. So we're just pushing pause on it until the strike is over, so that when the strike is over, those writers can then continue to be pitching on our podcast in hopes of getting it made according to union rules. And then for the free portion of our podcast where Angel and I are pitching, it's kind of up for debate right now.
Well, we're pitching where we're interviewing people.
So we're interviewing people, and we're also talking on the podcast with each other about the industry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just heard you say where we're pitching. We're not pitching on the other portion. We're
not pitching. We're only doing interviews. We're talking about the industry. We're talking about Hollywood. We're talking about screenwriting. Yes, we are not pitching on the free portion of the podcast.
Yeah, so we're still doing that, right?
Yeah, so Scriptnotes is still doing their stuff. They're reporting on the strike. And they have a bunch of really cool side paths, and the Screenwriting Life is also still doing interviews. So that's one of the questions we had for you today, Kevin, was where is your head? What are you thinking? What are next best steps?
I mean, my thought is, and just so people know, my involvement is mostly as a producer. Leah and Angel are the creative brains behind everything to do with the podcast. I'm just here to help and do a little social media. My take on it is the the conversations and the interviews and the discussion about writing is more important now than ever, right? There's a lot of writers out there who are a little bit uncertain about what's going on. I think um, there may be some people who want to who have some time at the moment who want to come on and express their feelings on the strike. I think there's a lot of probably aspiring writers who want to pitch and who are curious about, does this affect me? Does this affect my career ambitions? Should I run away from writing as fast as possible? The answer may be yes, regardless of the strike, but that's a different topic.
Yeah.
So I think it's critical to keep doing this because people are still writing. Every Writers Guild member out there is everyone on that picket line is going home and probably writing something because that's what writers do. And they're going to write their experiences and they're going to want to talk to other writers about what's going on. And I think these conversations are going to always continue happening. And there's no reason to stop having them. There's no reason that the things you guys talk about and the people you interview and the topics you cover and the message you're trying to convey and the help you're trying to provide to people is still important, and it will continue to be important. The strike won't go on forever, and there will be people who have ideas and want to pitch them and need to learn how. And so, to me, keep plugging away. I think I don't think the strike changes anything about the need and the benefits of what you provide. So,
Cool.
that's my
Yeah.
take. All right, cool. Um,
I have, we didn't discuss this, but I think it's important because I imagine a lot of our audience is pre-WGA, and there's been questions about what can I submit to, what can't I submit to, because it's now like submission season. And anything that is a fellowship with a studio, you can't submit to, is my understanding. If the strike is over tomorrow, yeah, go for it. If you've already submitted, you're fine. Maybe by the time the strike is over, or maybe by the time the whatever it is that you've applied to, they've released finalists, the strike is over by then. That's fine too. What you can be submitting to, I'm not sure if the Nichols is still open, but you can submit to the Nichols because it's not associated with any of the studios. You can submit to the Austin Film Festival because it's not associated with any of the studios, and I think it's more that you get a prize money or something like that. Any of the other ones I would look into. I'm just not sure. You can be writing any spec scripts. You can submit to, if you're doing like an indie film, that's fine. You can submit your indie script film to a producer. However, if that producer is then going to take that script and pitch it to Netflix or pitch it to Amazon, you can't give them that script then. That is just off the table. That is scab work. Did I cover everything, Angel?
what about agents? What about trying to find an agent? Is that still?
So you can still find an agent. You can still find a lit manager if you want to, just as long as they aren't pitching your stuff to any of the signatory companies.
Okay, makes sense.
And I'm not this looks like a very young cat to me.
I'm so curious. She
Yeah.
has to be on TV.
The old cats are never curious anymore. They've seen it all. This is young cat behavior.
By the time they're on their 9th life, it's just there's no curiosity left.
You covered a lot, Leah. I don't know if that's everything, but it sounds comprehensive. But if you're confused or you can just Google or go on Twitter, and there are several easy to parse resources or lists of what is considered
Yeah.
like acceptable to the WGA for pre-WGA writers, WGA
Yeah.
writers, yeah, and what is considered unacceptable or scab work. And the thing that the WGA does is they make a list of people who are known to have done scab work, and then they would
Mhm.
lock your entry into the WGA in perpetuity. I think it's for as long as you're alive. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you definitely, if you want to, if you aspire to be in the WGA one day, which you should, because there's strength in numbers and solidarity, and there's minimums and all the incredible things that guild offers, that union offers. You want to avoid doing scab work because you're 86th for life, basically.
Yeah. And recently I had to reach out to, so the Friday before we decided to strike, I had submitted to a signatory company, and just, I think today I remembered, oh no, well, that was perfect timing. So I had to email them and tell them, we can revisit this when the strike is over. And they were understanding and supportive.
Yeah, I also heard that if you have like a script on the blacklist, you should pause your script's ability to be downloaded. I think I just read that this
Mm,
morning. So if you have like scripts up
yeah.
on sites, this is one of the suggested things that I read. Someone either with the WJ or making one of these lists of smart and helpful things to do is if you have material out there that's on some hosted site, just pause the downloads.
Yeah.
Um, and you'll be safe then, right? You'll be safe from being 86th.
Yeah. And now's the perfect time to start a writers group. If you haven't had time before and you have time now, start a writers group, support each other, read each other's work, meet new friends on the picket line, because those are your people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also go to there's a bunch of restaurants in town and bars that are offering discounts to writers if they come in and show their WGA card. I know 3 Clubs, a place by my spot, is offering like 50% drinks or something like that. And there's a bunch of restaurants around town. So there's a lot of resources for people out there right now who are striking.
Yeah.
That they're like, hey,
Yeah.
we're supporting you. Come in and eat here, and we're standing in solidarity with you. So it's a good time to build the community for sure. Build your community.
I love that. And
I'm pretty
think
sure I
for
also
the,
saw a GoFundMe where you could give money to bring coffee to
oh,
people
that's
who are
great.
picketing.
Oh, nice,
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
nice.
I'll try and
Oh,
track that one down and find and put that link in the description.
Wonder if
I
there's
love
like
that.
a
And
mobile coffee, like mobile coffee truck.
I think
yeah,
that's what it's for. Like it was to kind of hire a mobile coffee truck and
Oh,
to
that'd be cool.
bring
Yeah, yeah.
coffee around to different places. Yeah.
very, very cool. So the DGA is open to negotiations next, and then it's SAG. And I think the DGA is the end of June. Is that right?
I don't know.
I don't remember. But the shortest strike was 10 to 14 days, 11, 14 days. I don't remember. And then the longest one was the one that we just had in 2007, and it lasted 100 days. So
Yeah, and the WGA.
may
I'm sorry, Leah. Go ahead.
we may be in for a long haul. Go ahead, Angel.
We may be in for a long haul. Yeah. I was going to say the WGA going first in order of negotiations is really important to support because it moves the needle for everyone who then comes after it, right?
Yeah.
So the DGA and then SAG and then IATSE was last year, but the WGA is. I keep coming back to this, but it's really important to support because then everyone in the Directors Guild and the entire Directors Guild itself will have the precedent set by the WGA to base their negotiations off of and improve and ensure livable working conditions and pay rates across the entire industry, which if you are associated with the industry in any way does have an effect on you.
Mm-hmm.
So first the WGA, then the DGA, and then SAG. And I think it's important to, support them all.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Cool. That's our strike conversation. I think we covered a lot of ground. I feel more knowledgeable, so thank you for all of the information that you read off your phone.
Yeah, thanks, Leah.
Yeah, you're welcome. It wasn't me, and I'm sorry for any misinterpretation from this. But if you go online, all of that is just very clear, black and white WGA negotiations. There's, if you go on my Twitter, I think both of you have retweeted this, but it's a PDF of what we asked for, and then AMPTP's offer, which were ridiculous.
Okay, cool.